Just stand up. Stop faking it. Those were the last words I heard before the world went gray. I was lying face down on my own driveway, my skin searing against the June asphalt, while the smell of smoked brisket, the party meal I'd spent all afternoon preparing, soaked into my hair. I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't even wiggle a toe. My husband, Ethan, didn't kneel. He didn't scream for help. He just stood over me with an eye roll, telling our 14 guests that I was just being dramatic again. But Ethan had a secret. For 5 months, he'd been hand-delivering my bedtime tea with a smile and a dose of industrial poison. I'm Sarah Miller, and this is a story about how the man I loved tried to turn my body into a prison for a $350,000 paycheck. Before we dive into how my lawyer uncovered a terrifying family tradition, please hit that subscribe button to join our community. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from today? Drop your city and time in the comments. I read every single one. Now, let's go back to that Saturday in June, because my dramatic fall was exactly what Ethan had been waiting for. To understand why I was lying on that driveway, paralyzed and humiliated, you have to understand the 5 months leading up to it. In the suburbs of Kentucky, life is supposed to be quiet. I spent my days as a billing coordinator for a vet clinic, staring at invoices for golden retriever dental cleanings. It was mundane, predictable, and safe, or so I thought. The shift didn't happen like a lightning strike. It was more like water damage, slow, invisible, rotting the structure of my life from the inside out. It started with a tingle, just a faint pins and needles sensation in my toes at the end of a long shift. I mentioned it to Ethan while we were folding laundry. He didn't even look up from his phone. "You're just on your feet too much, Sarah. Drink some water. You're overthinking it." That was the first seed of gaslighting. You're overthinking it. By month 2, the tingling turned into a crushing fatigue. I felt like I was wading through chest-high mud just to get from the bed to the bathroom. I was making mistakes at work. Me, the woman who hadn't miscoded a claim in 3 years. When I told Eleanor, my mother-in-law, she just sipped her diet soda and gave me that look. You know the one. That young women today have no stamina look. This came from a woman who took a victory lap after carrying a bag of dinner rolls from the car. Amidst my deteriorating health, there was one bright spot: my husband's sudden devotion. Ethan was never the romantic type. He forgot our anniversary 2 years running. But for the last 5 months, he became obsessed with my nightly ritual. Every single night at 9:12 p.m., he'd bring me a cup of chamomile tea. "Here you go, babe. Get your rest," he'd say, kissing my forehead. I felt so guilty for doubting him. I felt lucky. I thought this was his love language. I didn't know that the slight bitterness I tasted was the flavor of betrayal. I didn't know that every sip was stripping the protective coating off my nerves. By month 4, the clumsiness started. I was in the shower when my legs simply quit. I hit the tile wall hard, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. When I told Ethan, he laughed it off. "You probably just slipped on the conditioner, Sarah. Stop being so clumsy." He was so convincing that I actually started keeping a flashlight by the bed, terrified that my own body would betray me in the dark. The most sinister part? I tried to see a doctor, but Ethan, who handled our paperwork, forgot to add me to his new health insurance plan after he switched jobs at the auto parts warehouse. Every time I brought it up, he had an excuse. "The HR lady is on vacation," or "there was a glitch in the portal." Now I realize a wife without insurance is a wife without medical records. He wasn't being forgetful. He was being a janitor, cleaning up the evidence before it could even be recorded. He was building a narrative. He told my sister, Lily, that I was becoming obsessed with being sick. He used words like fragile, anxious, and mentally unstable. He prepared our friends to see me as the wife who cried wolf. He didn't just want me sick, he wanted me invisible. He wanted everyone to look at me and see a problem to be managed, not a human being in pain. So, by the time that Saturday in June rolled around, the stage was perfectly set. The guests were there. The sun was out. And the poison Ethan had been feeding me for 150 nights was ready to take center stage. The heat of that Saturday was suffocating. I was crossing the driveway, balanced precariously on legs that felt like they were made of glass, carrying a massive platter of smoked brisket toward the backyard. And then, the lights went out. Not the sun, but my nervous system. My legs didn't just stumble, they deleted themselves. I hit the concrete face first. The platter shattered, and for a second, the only thing I could feel was the hot grease soaking into my blouse and the metallic tang of blood in my mouth. I tried to push up, nothing. I tried to wiggle my toes, absolute zero. Ethan walked over. He didn't run. He didn't drop his grilling tongs. He stood over me, silhouetted by the afternoon sun, and sighed. That heavy, annoyed sigh you give when a delivery is late. Seriously, Sarah? Get up. You're making a scene in front of everyone. I looked up at him, tears blurring my vision, and whispered, Ethan, I can't feel my legs. He didn't flinch. He just looked at the guests and rolled his eyes. She does this, he announced, loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. She's been fainting for months. Just give her a minute to finish her performance. Eleanor marched over then, her heels clicking like a death march on the pavement. You always have to be the center of attention, don't you? She spat. I spent 3 days planning this for my son, and you can't even walk 20 feet without a dramatic collapse? For 90 agonizing seconds, I lay there, invisible, erased, surrounded by 14 people who had been trained by my husband to believe I was a liar. I was a ghost at my own funeral. Then, the sirens. Someone had called 911. I still don't know who, but that sound was the first thing in months that told me I wasn't alone. When the ambulance pulled in, a paramedic named Chloe knelt beside me. She didn't look at Ethan. She didn't listen to his "she's just stressed" routine. She looked at me. She ran a pinprick test. Nothing. She tapped my patellar tendon with her reflex hammer. My legs stayed dead. I saw her expression shift, that stone-cold professional mask that paramedics wear when they realize the situation is much darker than a fainting spell. When did this start? She asked. 5 months ago, I whispered. The tingling, the tea, it always tastes bitter. I saw Chloe's pen stop for a fraction of a second on the word tea. She looked up at Ethan, who was hovering, trying to manage the scene. He told her it was anxiety. She told him, in a voice like liquid nitrogen, to step back and let her do her job. She saw the red flags that everyone else had missed. A husband who wasn't holding his wife's hand, but was instead reciting a rehearsed medical history. At the hospital, the silence was even louder. They ran an MRI, but it wasn't a tumor or MS. Then came the toxicology screen, the one Chloe had specifically requested in her handoff notes. 2 hours later, the doctor walked in. He didn't stand at the foot of the bed. He pulled up a chair. That's when you know the news is life-altering. He told me they found methylene chloride in my blood. It's a solvent, he explained. Paint stripper, degreaser. It's been stripping the protective coating off your nerves for months, Sarah. This wasn't one accident. This was a slow, deliberate dosage. The room spun. My mind raced to Ethan's job. He was a manager at an auto parts warehouse. He lived surrounded by chemicals. He'd been bringing me that bedtime tea every night for 150 nights, kissing my forehead as he handed me a cup of paralysis. But it wasn't just the poison. While I was fighting to breathe, Ethan had been busy. The police discovered he'd forged my name on a $350,000 life insurance policy. Even worse, he'd already rented a studio apartment in Florence, Kentucky, a secret bachelor pad filled with new furniture, paid for with $200 he'd stolen from our joint account. He wasn't just waiting for me to get sick. He was waiting for me to die so he could walk into a new life, funded by my ghost. The hospital room felt colder the moment Detective Diana Vance walked in. She had the kind of face that had seen every dark corner of the human heart and wasn't impressed by any of it. She didn't lead with sympathy, she led with facts. And the facts were more terrifying than the poison coursing through my veins. Sarah, she began, her voice steady as a heartbeat, we found the container. It was in the garage, tucked behind a row of bowling trophies and some old paint cans. Industrial-grade methylene chloride. Ethan's employer confirmed he'd been signing it out for 6 months. He told them he was doing extra inventory cleaning. Nobody questioned him because, to them, Ethan was the reliable guy. That was the first blow. But the second blow came from a stack of printouts in her hand. Eleanor's text messages. In the movies, villains are loud. In real life, they're mundane. I read the messages between Ethan and his mother. She's complaining about the taste again. Ethan had messaged 3 weeks ago. Eleanor's response? Just add more honey. The party is Saturday. Make sure she doesn't have the energy to ruin it. Eleanor wasn't just a difficult mother-in-law. She wasn't just overbearing. She was the architect. She was the one monitoring my symptoms like a lab technician, feeding Ethan instructions on how to gaslight me when I got suspicious. She stood over me on that driveway, calling me a liar, while she knew exactly why my legs had quit. She wasn't just watching me fall, she was cheering for the finish line. But then Detective Vance dropped the bombshell that made my blood turn to ice. We did a deep dive into the family history, she said, leaning in. Ethan's father, Raymond Miller. He died in 2011. He was 49, healthy, and then he wasn't. The medical records show 6 months of unexplained neurological decline, tingling, fatigue, eventual organ failure. At the time, they called it natural causes. No toxicology was ever ordered. After all, Eleanor was the grieving widow, a respectable school cafeteria worker. The room went silent. The implication hung in the air like smoke. This wasn't Ethan's original idea. He didn't just stumble upon a chemical manual. He was a student. This was a family recipe passed down from mother to son, a cold, calculated method of disposal that Eleanor had used before and was now teaching her golden boy to perfect. I thought about Eleanor's kitchen, the way she used to brag about her secret recipes. I never realized the most lethal one was the one she shared with Ethan over my evening tea. The following Tuesday, at 5:52 a.m., the quiet life on Dorsey Avenue ended. I wasn't there to see it, but Detective Vance described it perfectly. They didn't just knock. They arrived with the weight of the law. When the handcuffs clicked around Ethan's wrists, he didn't scream his innocence. He didn't ask about me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He looked at the badge and said 4 words. I want a lawyer. It's funny. The innocent ones usually yell. The ones who planned it just go quiet. 12 minutes later, they were at Eleanor's door. She tried to slam it, but the officers were faster. She screamed that I was a liar, that her precious Leo, her name for Ethan, would never do this. But the neighbors were watching. Agatha from across the street saw the respectable Eleanor Miller being led away in a bathrobe, her legacy of shadows finally exposed to the morning sun. As they sat in separate cells, the loyalty they pretended to have vanished. Within a week, their stories began to rot. Ethan's lawyer hinted that his mother pressured him. Eleanor's lawyer claimed she was clueless about the tea. The two people who had conspired to erase me were now trying to erase each other. But I wasn't erased. I was lying in a hospital bed, watching the feeling return to my shins, realizing that the only thing more powerful than their poison was my survival. They say nerves heal at a rate of about 1 inch per month. It is a slow, agonizingly quiet process, much like the way my life had been dismantled. But 3 weeks after that nightmare on the driveway, I did something Ethan and Eleanor never thought possible. I stood up. I was in the hospital corridor, my hands white-knuckled on the cold metal of a walker. My sister Lily was standing right beside me, her eyes red from crying. This time, the good kind of tears. My legs shook like a newborn colt's, and the left one felt like it was made of static, but I took 1 step, then another. 4 steps in total. It was more than a walk. It was a finish line. Every inch of progress was a middle finger to the man who told me to stop faking it. The legal fallout was just as swift as my physical recovery. Ethan was facing a mountain of charges: attempted first-degree murder, insurance fraud, and forgery. When the district attorney laid out the evidence, the secret apartment in Florence, the forged signatures, the logs from the warehouse, Ethan's good guy persona shattered. He was sentenced to 25 years. He traded his backyard grill and his bowling league for an orange jumpsuit and a concrete cell. Eleanor's fate was even darker. The state officially moved to exhume the body of her first husband, Raymond. The family tradition had finally run out of shadows to hide in. While she sat in a holding facility, unable to post her $500,000 bail, she realized the world was finally paying her the one thing she always accused me of seeking: attention. Only this time, it was from a grand jury. Under Kentucky law, justice has a way of being very poetic. When a spouse commits a felony against you, the court doesn't just split the assets 50-50, they split them in the direction of the survivor. I didn't just get my life back. I got the house, the savings, and every cent Ethan had stolen for his secret life. I recovered roughly $187,000 in assets. It wasn't a lottery win. It was the price of my pain, and I intended to spend it on peace. I sold the house on Dorsey Avenue 2 months later. I couldn't stand to look at that driveway anymore, to see the spot where my neighbors watched me suffer and did nothing. I moved to a small, sun-drenched apartment in Newport, just 12 minutes from Lily. It has a tiny kitchen with white counters and a window that catches the sunset. I also have a new roommate. He's an orange tabby I rescued from the clinic where I work. He was missing his left eye from an old infection, a little broken, but still standing, just like me. I named him Verdict. People usually chuckle when they hear it, but I don't care. Every time he purrs on my lap, it's a reminder that the truth always finds a way to the surface. I still drink tea every night, but now I'm the only one who touches the kettle. Sometimes I just stand there, watching the water boil, marveling at the simple beauty of a cup of tea that doesn't taste like betrayal. The scars on my nervous system are permanent. My feet still feel a little numb when the weather turns cold. But I've learned something through all of this. The people who scream at you to stand up are often the ones most terrified that you actually will. I'm standing now, Ethan, and I've never seen the world more clearly. Sometimes the people screaming at you to stand up are the ones who put you on the ground. This journey taught me one vital lesson: never silence your intuition to keep the peace. Your body knows the truth long before your heart is ready to accept it. If Sarah's story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe to join our From My Heart community. It helps us share more stories of justice. What would you have done in Sarah's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching and stay safe. I'll see you in the next one.